So I stumbled across this video recently, The Downfall of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate by MintJoy Pictures. And considering that I personally have also been playing some other platform fighters the last few months, I was in the mood to check it out. So I reached out about doing a reaction and they were on board. This is still primarily a Smash channel for the record. I really like Smash Ultimate, but still should be an interesting perspective. I haven't seen this yet. I have no idea if it's any good. Presumably, if you're seeing this video, that means it is good. Let's get into it.
Smash Bros. Ultimate kinda sucks now. I said it.
Okay, that was fast. Strong hook. Let's see where he's going with this.
The game just doesn't hit the same, nor does it feel as grand and special as it always was. It doesn't seem like I'm the only one either. A lot of other creators have expressed their frustrations with the game. But why is that? How can a game like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate end up like this? You see, ever since Sora has been announced, this game has sort of collapsed into this weird downward spiral. While still a very high quality game, a lot of the perception from the casuals and its most loyal fans have shifted over to a more pessimistic view of the game.
To an extent, isn't that just the nature of the beast though? I honestly can't think of all that many games that have stayed just as beloved and relevant once their content cycle ends. There's obviously Melee, but Melee's a freak of nature, let's be real. And Melee never really had a content cycle, if we're being honest. There was a new version of it released, the PAL version, but we don't even play on that, so it's kind of a moot point. And most of the other games that people sort of view through rose-tinted glasses like that, they're kind of in the same boat. Now, there are some other examples I could cherry pick, particularly among fighting games. Street Fighter Third Strike still has a very good reputation. Let's see.
Others say it's because Smash was capitalizing from what was a dark age for fighting games. I believe it's more than that. While Smash Ultimate has and still is very popular, I can't stop but to think there was a point in time where the game definitively fell from grace, and I just might know what started it all.
Interesting.
It's going to be unlike any other production we've made in the past. This is a story of passion, hard work, but also filled with pressure, greed, and destroying a community. This is the rise and fall of Smash Bros. Ultimate.
For the record, I'm still going into this thinking that the fall of Smash Ultimate is a bit of hyperbole. The game still seems to be doing pretty well overall, but I'm open to hearing otherwise.
In order to understand what caused the downfall of Smash Ultimate, we need to take a step back to where it all started. Meet Masahiro Sakurai. He's been the director of every single Smash title since the beginning, way back at Smash 64. Smash 64 was a strong base for what was to come. Smash Melee heavily built on that foundation to eventually become the first mainstream entry.
Melee was the first mainstream entry, is that true? Okay, well the original Super Smash Bros. Sold 5.5 million copies, which even by modern standards is not too shabby, and on the Nintendo 64, that sounds pretty good. The best-selling game ever was Super Mario 64, about 12 million copies. That was a launch title though, to be fair, and one of the most important revolutionary games ever created, so selling half as many copies as that is honestly pretty good. Comparing it to Melee, it's the best-selling GameCube game with more than 7 million copies sold worldwide. So 5.5 million to 7 million, that's a jump. Is it enough of a jump to call it the first mainstream entry? I don't know. Yeah, sure, it's the best-selling GameCube game compared to being a top 10 N64 game, but the GameCube sadly did not do very well for itself. The bestseller having 7 million copies is not great. What I will say though is that to this day, Melee is absolutely by far the biggest leap forward the series took. Smash 64 was this illicit little project that Sakurai worked on behind the scenes that eventually convinced the higher ups to bring to market, and you know, it was a fun game. It was a nice little demonstration of what a Nintendo fighting game could be, but then Melee comes out and it's like, oh my god, everything from the look to the feel to the content included. How did they make this happen? Especially with a 13-month development cycle. That's still, as far as I'm concerned, one of the craziest stories in gaming. I don't know, like Sakurai's a madman. Probably literally during that time period, considering how little sleep he was getting.
Brawl was the most successful and even gave us third-party characters for the first time. And Smash 4 for the Wii U and 3DS was seen as the definitive and best playing entry in this franchise.
Brawl did kill it specifically because the Wii killed it, and because they knew the Wii was going to be directed at more casual audiences, that's directly responsible for a lot of its design choices that hardcore fans don't like. The floatiness, the lack of combos, the slow pace. Sakurai's gone on record talking about this. The different controller contributed as well, if I remember right. And yeah, a lot of competitive players didn't like any of that, and it created the divide between Melee and the modern titles that still exist to this day. Now, as a kid, before I discovered the concept of competitive Smash, I couldn't care less about any of that. I honestly didn't even really know the distinction existed. With my brothers and my friends, it would be like, yeah, I don't want to play Melee anymore. You can't snap to the ledge. It's too hard to make it back. Melee doesn't have Stage Builder. I love Stage Builder. So to that much bigger audience, the audience that I was a part of before I started discovering competitive play near the end of Brawl's lifespan, span. Yeah, I do think you would consider Smash 4 the ultimate version of the game, funny enough. It had way more characters, it had functional online play, it didn't have tripping in it, which even the casuals hated. Its look was much more timeless. I liked Brawl's visuals at the time, but I gotta admit they didn't age particularly well. A lot of that era was going for realism and grungy textures and stuff like that. I think as a very widely applicable rule of thumb, cartoony visuals just age better. I would still maybe argue that Smash 4 is the best overall looking Smash title. Didn't have Subspace Emissary though, and its stage builder also sucked, so you know, not all good.
Which brings us now to the true start of the story. The year is 2016. We are hot off the heels from Smash 4's DLC releases. This was a very important point in the series and Sakurai's career. You see, former CEO of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, passed away. One of the things he requested to Sakurai was to make the next Smash Bros. Game. If this was going to be the last game he could work on, then he was going to make this the biggest and greatest Smash game to ever exist. But how was this going to be possible? There's no way he could completely make a new game with that kind of roster. Well, that's the neat part. They didn't. You see, the thing about Smash Ultimate is that a lot of the assets, mechanics, are taken from Smash 4, with a lot of its code being taken from as early as Brawl.
Super Smash Bros. Is one of the largest franchises on the planet, and it has access to a ton of developers, a ton of funding, but the reality is, there's only so much you can scale up a project like this. Everyone has to deal with feature and managerial bloat. It's frankly a miracle that video games on this kind of scale ever function properly at all. There are so many systems that go into it. Recycling just has to be the name of the game.
That said, let's move on to the next section, the rise. So, now that Smash Ultimate has wrapped up development, it's the moment where everyone was waiting for. On March 8th, 2018, at the end of a Nintendo Direct, we got a very special teaser showing off some Inklings just duking it out as usual. But then, the scene goes dark. What could this mean? As we were all wondering what was going on, we see one of the Inklings turn around, only to see a very particular logo. And let me tell you, this was huge.
I lost my shit when I saw this. I was making videos at the time. I wasn't recording my reactions yet. I kind of wish I had, because I was on an adrenaline rush for the rest of the day. Yeah, this looks about right.
A brand new Smash game is here, with Inklings being one of the first of many newcomers to follow. Summer of 2018, everyone is here. Ridley announcement, August, Simon and Richter reveal, September 14th, Isabelle joins the battle. November 1st, the Grinch didn't make it to Smash, but at least we got Ken and Incineroar.
The Grinch. So for people who weren't around during the hype cycle, the Grinch was this quote-unquote leaker who popped up and just promised all sorts of wild stuff that didn't end up making it into the game. I don't really remember why he was believed in the first place, but yeah, the final newcomer roster for the game didn't even come close to living up to it, and I personally never really bought into those. There were so many bad leaks going around as usual that I just treated it like white noise like I always do, but some people for whatever reason really bought into this one, and they ended up feeling pretty burned, and I'm sure they'll definitely learn their lesson once the next hype cycle ramps up, right?
The entirety of 2018 was exclusively made to promote Smash Ultimate. This was a genius tactic, because a big thing of Smash's overall popularity is in speculation. A big reason a lot of people love to talk about Smash Bros in general is through knowing who else could possibly make it to the roster. Believe me, I was a big player in the conversation. The wait was just long enough to really make that speculation last as long as possible, but not too much so people don't forget about the game. This, as a result, made the Smash community grow exponentially.
To this day, the roster is still the biggest thing I would say Smash has that other platform fighters and even fighting games in general, even games in general, can't really compete against. Multiverses is probably closest. They also obviously have some huge IPs, but as iconic as the Warner Brothers catalog is, it just lacks the inherent cohesiveness of all of Nintendo's biggest icons, plus the few third parties who are revered and worthy enough to join in. And look, Batman, Powerpuff Girls, Raven, those are all huge, but in the gaming space specifically, none of them are the knockout blow of like a Minecraft Steve, Sonic the Hedgehog, Cloud Strife. Those kinds of reveals are events. They're tidal waves that basically nothing can stand in the path of.
Smash no longer felt like a community made up of Nintendo fans. Everyone knew about Smash by this point. Leakers, fans, creators, you name it, all giving their own takes on who is going to be the next Smash newcomer. Well, let me tell you what was the absolute cherry on top of this Ultimate Sunday. During the Game Awards, get this, just a day before the game's release, we got a very special reveal. You may have heard this character before. He's from a little popular indie game called Persona 5. Yes, you heard me. Joker from Persona 5 was announced to be a DLC fighter in the Game Awards a day before Smash Ultimate releases.
Yeah, before the Joker reveal, I honestly didn't really realize how popular Persona 5 actually was. He was a name that I'd heard tossed around as a Smash inclusion before, but it's kind of like, okay, sure, toss it in the pile with the other 500 JRPG characters, right? The excitement around this straight up caught me off guard because I don't really play a lot of JRPGs. I think the last one I did was the original Octopath Traveler. I was in a bubble. Now, the decision to reveal the DLC character right before the game launched, that really was some fantastic marketing, and the way they executed it was really nice too. Very dramatic, the Phantom Thieves take over the presentation, very Jokery from what I understand. Not that the game particularly needed even more of a marketing push behind it, but hey, never hurts.
So, with all this done, it's only bound the game was an immediate success, right? Ha! Calling it a success would be way beyond an understatement. After almost a full year of waiting, it was finally here. Smash Bros. Ultimate finally released for the Nintendo Switch on December 7th, 2018. And my god, what a game. First week alone, the game already sold 5 million copies.
Yeah, that's why I say Smash 64 numbers aren't particularly impressive to the series by modern standards. A week and it's almost outstripping it. Jesus.
Up until this point, we've been discussing the overall build-up. It's only from here where we start to see what contributed to keep up this momentum. Ah yes, 2019. What many consider the game's defining year. Everyone was playing this game. Seriously, you cannot go into a party without Ultimate being one of the highlights there. Oh, and don't even get me started on the tournaments. EVO, SmashCon, Genesis. Smash Ultimate was thriving in all of these with little to no competition. Obviously, Smash Ultimate was a hot new thing at the time, but my god, tournaments were like the thing to be tuning in for.
Yeah, there was a period early on where Smash Ultimate was like the unifying game among the competitive scene. You would have the Brawl Smash 4 heads in there, but also Melee players. You would have some traditional fighting game players joining in, even people from well outside the scene entirely. It's kind of like what Project M did back in the day, and to an extent, even what Rivals of Aether 2 is doing right now, but on a grander scale, like much, much bigger. It really was a game for everyone. It had the sheer roster to appeal to even the most casual fans, and then some actually pretty decent competitive mechanics too. They brought back some of the speed, they made shields way less oppressive. They toned down a lot of the cheese, they made the roster much more balanced. There were some other not so good decisions made too, which I'm sure we'll get into here, but yeah, it was a great time.
Why don't we talk about a few of the contributions that helped make this year what it was? So let's start with the DLC. We got Piranha Plants. As a character, he wasn't anything too crazy, nor was he really a character that was viable in tournaments, but he was still great regardless.
Piranha Plant wasn't super viable in tournaments, no, but basically everyone in Smash Ultimate can be called good enough, and that definitely applied even more back in the day.
He really was just a character to hold us off until the true fighter to steal the show, Joker. I have an entire production regarding his moveset, and all I'm gonna say is, my god, he really stole the show. Not only was he one of the most busted characters in the game, he was just an all-around fun character to play as.
Yeah, Joker actually ended up being quite powerful and needing some minor nerfs later on. I gotta say though, it took people a while to figure it out. Early reports were honestly more like, he's okay, Nintendo's learned their lesson, they've toned the DLC way down from the Smash 4 days where it was clearly broken. When MKLeo first broke Joker out at a major, I remember thinking like, oh, what an interesting character choice. I wonder if he knows something we don't. And yep, that was fair. He's not looked at nearly as highly nowadays, but he's still clearly one of the better characters in the game and still is a lot of fun to watch.
A few months later, at E3 2019, not only did we get one, but two new fighters announced. First one was Hero from Dragon Quest, and was later released on July 30th, 2019. He was the first of the Fighter Pass characters to get an actual controversy rolling around. Well, two actually. The first one was about how he was just another quote-unquote anime sword fighter. This was just silly hate for not knowing what the character was going to be about, because soon after release, he became pretty beloved by most Smash fans, with the whole randomness mechanic and stuff. The other controversy mainly was about the competitive scene and how Hero can't be in tournaments because he's Hero. Fortunately, it wasn't long until the situation died down.
Okay, so before we get into Banjo, yes, the controversy did die down and no one's really calling for Hero to be banned nowadays, but I still think the fact that he doesn't allow multilingual tournaments to function smoothly is a real issue. Yeah, sure, a lot of the initial calls for his banning had nothing to do with that, it was just people mad about the RNG stuff, which I was never on board with personally, but I do think objectively speaking, because of the language barrier issue, he is the most ban-worthy character we've ever had.
Banjo-Kazooie. While not as impactful or fun as a character in my opinion, his announcement in Smash heavily solidified just how much the developers understand their fans. A big win for the community.
Yeah, Banjo-Kazooie wasn't an earth-shattering character like Hero was, at least for Japanese players, but he's someone who was a long-time request. He really felt like he belonged in Smash, and that was Sakurai going, okay, here you go. They had to reach out to Microsoft to make it happen. I'm sure it took a lot of coordination, but I would say it was worth it. He just, yeah, feels like he belongs in Smash.
Oh, and also we got Terry. He's cool. Nobody really knew who he was, at least for US fans, but that was quick to change because Terry was a super fun character to play as.
I did know who Terry was, but at the time I couldn't really have told you too much beyond the series he was from. It was just never one I'd paid that much attention to, and even that's, yeah, more than most North Americans would be able to bring up. Apparently in Latin America though, where the King of Fighters series is very popular, they lost their minds over this, and Sakurai himself is a King of Fighters fan, so it made sense.
Like I said, this year has easily been, and always will be remembered as one of the best performing for this game. The problem now lies in what's coming up. There's a reason why I'm going through this timeline by its years. This is sadly where our story takes a deep, dark turn. Let's talk about the downfall.
That's earlier than I was expecting this to start. Let's see.
Understanding what made Smash Ultimate collapse as hard as it did wasn't something that just happened overnight, rather a multitude of events leading up towards this very moment. If there was any point in time where this downfall showed its cracks, however, it definitely goes to this very trailer. Byleth was the last official character for Fighter Pass 1. This set the Smash community in flames. Seriously, just watch any Smash creator's reaction to this and you'll see for yourself. I feel like a lot of goodwill from fans was already dwindling. People were out here saying they regret buying the DLC because of Byleth. So, that's not to worry. We still have another pass to look forward to, with tons of tournaments along the way.
Okay, so I'm on record as saying I really like playing as Byleth. That's no huge surprise. Some of my favorite characters are like Ike, Marth. I main Dark Pit, who also has a sword and a spinning air and a bow and arrow. I main Clarin in Rivals 2. I main Wonder Woman in Multiverses. So this is absolutely my kind of character. I do think they're really fun, but yeah, this was not a good call. It really wasn't. It really did feel like a lesson not particularly well learned, especially the timing. On top of that, sword fighters were already kind of controversially good in the Smash Ultimate meta. There were a lot of viable ones and they could just kind of safely mash aerials on your shield. So across the board, people were already a bit sick of this, and that would have been the case even if the previous DLC hadn't already had a different anime sword fighter in it.
Well, Byleth definitely started the downward spiral of this game. Nothing caused more damage than the recent 2020 lockdowns. People now couldn't go outside and visit these events, nor was it recommended to host them for up to 2 years. This was not only a very hard time for Smash fans, but pretty much everyone involved. Smash is a game that was designed with local multiplayer in mind, so when you're restricting the ability to be able to play the game as it was intended, this just caused a disaster to say the least. The online in Smash Ultimate is notorious for just how unreliable it is. A lot of the tournaments during this time really tried their hardest to look past this, but it was just a terrible experience for everyone.
Smash Ultimate does not use rollback netcode. When it was released, we were kind of in the era where fighting games were really starting to transition over and touted as a feature. Nowadays, it's expected. To make things as simple as possible, rollback essentially cheats for you, so you can move freely on your own screen, and then it will attempt to guess what your opponent is doing on every given frame. And statistically, given how many frames there are in a game, the vast majority of the time, the guess will be correct. Now, if it's not, say it was predicting your opponent was just going to keep moving through the air, but they double jumped instead, then as soon as that information that the opponent actually double jumped reaches your console, it rolls back that prediction and snaps the opponent to where they should actually be doing what they should actually be doing. That comes with some of its own pitfalls. You can get, for example, a false hit confirmation for a frame or two because it thought you hit your opponent, but in reality they were in a different spot. But overall, on your screen, you can still move your own character without a lot of extra input delay, which makes it feel far better than the delay-based netcode, the old system that Smash Ultimate uses. And it's not even particularly good delay-based netcode. There's a mod out there that improves it. Sakurai did originally look at implementing rollback netcode, but decided against it because there would be too many consequences. And on the one hand, I understand. To name one example, anything that happens on frame 1 in rollback netcode generally doesn't work super well because it doesn't give the rollback any kind of leeway. If you look at Rivals of Aether 2, which does use a rollback algorithm, there aren't actually a lot of things happening on frame 1. And that's not even an overly complicated example. You basically need to reprogram every single element of your game so that rollback can keep track of it. And considering that, as this video mentioned, Smash Ultimate already had to recycle a lot of systems just to meet its time quota, yeah, rollback probably wasn't super viable to implement, but man, it's a shame that it wasn't, because this online is just terrible. Like I said, I've been playing some other platform fighters recently, and trying to transition from those back to Smash Ultimate, it just feels like you're walking in tar.
Let's just say the lockdowns weren't the only thing the community had to worry about. We are not a commentary channel, and I will not give any names nor attention to what's happened in this point in time. All I'm gonna say is, at this very moment in the timeline, there's been several Smash players that were called out for very specific reasons. This not only destroyed the trust of many notable players, but it also painted the Smash community in a light that will forever haunt it.
Okay, so yeah, the Smash Purge of 2020, not a fun one, is it? I guess this is what he's alluding to with the downfall. I was thinking more in terms of raw viewer numbers and stuff like that, but no, in retrospect, this counts. I'm not gonna get too stuck in the weeds of that one either. It doesn't make for a particularly fun video, but what I will say is Smash is a game for everyone, and that's not always a good thing. This is something that a lot of popular games communities have had to deal with over the years. I know Minecraft is particularly notorious for it, but Smash Ultimate, if anything, makes things worse because there's a very in-person culture to tournament games, which potentially puts young, vulnerable people directly alongside bad actors. The fact that, like, you'd have big tournaments where minors were just flying across the country by themselves and staying in the same hotel rooms as adults, that kind of thing always just spoke to me as a really rotten aspect of Smash culture, and I want to say spoke, not speaks, because I think they've tamped way down on that over time. I can't say for sure, and I also think this assertion I've heard too many times of, hey, look everyone, we got all the rot out in 2020, we're good now, is incredibly naive. I don't want to get too soapboxy here, but if you're in the Smash scene watching this and you ever find yourself in a position to step up, I hope you'll step up. I'll leave it there.
In the end, any strong goodwill left in the fandom around this time was completely destroyed after this point. I'm not kidding when I say it was an overall very hard time to be a Smash fan. So, to lighten up the mood, why don't we take a small detour and look over some of the remaining DLC and how they contributed to this timeline. To start, the first character we got was Min Min.
Lighten the mood, he says, while putting Min Min on the screen. Well, it's more fun than the previous topic, I'll give you that.
She was a character. I personally didn't like her inclusion, just felt like a tad too forgettable.
Forgettable and also way too late. ARMS did kind of seem to be gunning for one of Nintendo's big new IP slots, but it failed? I mean, okay, failed is probably a bit of a stretch. It sold about 2.5 million copies, which are respectable numbers, so they made their money back for sure. But considering it's supposed to be, you know, a bright, colorful, easily accessible alternative fighting game that releases near the start of a console's life and showcases all its new mechanics, I'm not sure that fine sales numbers are really what they're looking for, to be honest. They dropped support for it relatively quickly, didn't really have a lot of word of mouth after very long. It just wasn't really all that clear what she was doing here. Like Byleth, more people probably disliked overall, but at the same time, Fire Emblem Three Houses was a huge game, and using Smash to market Fire Emblem wasn't really all that surprising, not the first time. Min Min was honestly just more confusing than anything else, and it didn't help that she played terribly. I think to this day, she's one of Sakurai's most egregious designs.
Steve! I mean, that's cool. Okay, in all seriousness, Steve being a brand new fighter just makes so much sense. And it did actually get a lot of fans coming back. I mean, he straight up broke Twitter, so that's fun to see.
I saw a lot of people, not necessarily in my circle, but like around it, complaining about this one, going like, oh, it's for the cringy kiddos. That's what Smash is now. Guys, you got Banjo-Kazooie. There is no character that screams, I part my hair to the side and vaguely remember my parents worrying about Y2K, quite like Banjo-Kazooie. Smash is for everyone, and Steve was for everyone. I don't know how many new players he brought into the fold, and yes, he's too powerful competitively, but if you look at his competitive base, it's telling that a lot of his players are on the younger side. To this day, Minecraft is still one of, if not the most played video games of all time, and by doing this, Sakurai essentially secured an entire new generation of Smash fans. Plus, it's just a good game, alright? I don't really play it anymore unless I need to make content on it, but when I do need to make content on it, it's kind of fun to go back.
Sephiroth! No way! It's Sephiroth, bro!
Sephiroth was a true return of form when it came to these character reveals for me. Not only was he pretty unique and awesome, it also gave us a ton of Final Fantasy representation. Easily the best addition to the roster if you ask me.
Best addition to the roster, that's tricky. He's probably the most overall famous video game villain that hadn't been in yet. Maybe. His trailer went hard as hell, I can't deny that.
We got more characters like Pyra and Mithra who were great for the JRPG fans, Kazuya, another perfect addition and doesn't hurt having another fighting game character, and lastly we got Sora, who pretty much wrapped the fighter pass in a very solid way. Honestly, you could kinda say this is starting to look like a true redemption for Ultimate.
Pyra and Mithra, I think we're in that camp of good if you're a fan and it has a decent amount of fans, but not earth-shattering. Kazuya, honestly the same. Tekken is quite a big fighting game after all, but you need to keep things in at least a bit of perspective against the true titans of the video game industry. Fighting games as a whole just aren't that big, unless you're specifically Smash. Sora though, yeah, I'll give it up. If nothing else, just because he was the most requested character in polls, he's a great way to end the pass.
Fighter Pass 2 really helped the game move forward. Sure, it's no longer seen as the big shiny game it once was, but its future was looking to be really positive, and for a good while, it was. Despite getting the final patch update in December of 2021, 2022 was a fantastic year for tournaments. The days of lockdown are finally behind us. So, why am I still saying all this? In the downfall section, Nintendo as a brand is one that's very protective of their IPs. So it's not surprising when they are willing to take action against these tournaments.
I think I know what he's going to get into here, but before he does, I just want to say, I feel like that Fighters Pass 2 point was brushed over a bit. Because while those reveals were exciting for the time, in retrospect, a lot of Smash players actually really dislike most of Fighters Pass 2. Min, well, I've talked about Min. She punches you from the other side of the stage. Steve, he ended up not being playtested properly and the patches shut down too early, and as a result, he's taken over the competitive scene, and a lot of people really despise how he plays. He spends the entire game trying to separate himself from you, but then once you close in, he's usually dealing more damage than you are. Pyromithra, despite the transformation mechanic, ended up just being a very bland, cookie-cutter-ish kind of character. Extremely powerful, extremely intuitive to pick up, which makes them ubiquitous, and the polarized nature of the two fighters doesn't even really matter because it's so easy to switch between them. Kazuya, he's a touch of death character, spend the entire game running away from him or die. A lot of people don't like that. So the prevailing sentiment I've heard from the competitive scene, which is what this video is focused on, is that a lot of people generally think the game would be in a far healthier state if Fighters Pass 2 just didn't exist. If you look at the DLC up to that point, they're totally fine. Joker's tuning caused some controversy and so did Hero's randomness, but in retrospect, those seem almost quaint.
Throughout past years, there's been numerous cases of Nintendo just taking action against them and shutting them down. This, as a result, not only left the community in a bit of a tense environment, worried that suddenly Nintendo could shut down their events, but also restricted a lot of potential growth the fanbase could gain. October 24th, 2023, Nintendo published a set of guidelines for anyone who wants to plan out a tournament event. Now, let me just get this out of the way. This is not a problem in itself. I watched several productions from lawyers analyzing these guidelines, and most of which agreed this is a common practice. Things like safety precautions, revenue, and brand association are in fact very real and important things to consider. The problem lies in how restrictive a lot of these rules are. Tournaments can only hold up to 200 participants for in-person events, or up to 300 in an online environment. Organizers cannot profit over $10,000 within a 12-month period. Tournaments cannot be sponsored by third parties. No prize money can have a market value of over $5,000. In other words, you thought you could make a living out of making Smash tournaments? Well, Nintendo made that practically impossible. Now, of course, you can apply for a tournament license if you wish to make a large-scale tournament with sponsors and a bigger prize pool. It also doesn't seem like it's that hard to obtain, but you never know how much more challenging this kind of stuff can be for organizers. These rules aren't the definitive end for Smash Ultimate, but it really did become the final nail in the coffin. After the news of these guidelines went out, a lot of Smash fans just stopped. Everything listed right now is definitively the cause for the end of Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Okay, so a few things to consider here. First off, a lot of Nintendo's legal stuff just sucks. I haven't forgotten that content creators sign-on program they tried to pull. Fuck you. In this case, I'm mixed because frankly, the Smash community by this point had shown that Nintendo had reason to be nervous about how their IP was being associated. Some of these limits do seem kind of draconian, but at the same time, it's not like Nintendo of America actually turned out to be particularly stingy with giving licenses out, and plenty of majors happen to this day. It's true there are less than there used to be, but I think you can definitely make the case that at least some of that was a bubble bursting, and Smash was never actually that sustainable to begin with. The number one rule of esports is that there's no money in esports. This is something organizations have to learn over and over again. And I also remember a lot of top players getting burnt out earlier in Ultimate's life because of the sheer amount of events they had to keep attending just to stay relevant in the rankings. I actually think a major omission in this video is the collapse of the Smash World Tour around the same time. That, if anything, might be the biggest downfall of Smash Ultimate in my mind. Now, this is a very messy story, and I'm going to keep it simple and not point any blame myself. What's more important is the overall outcome. So there were two circuits that were not exactly competing with each other, but certainly running concurrently. There was the Smash World Tour being ran by VG Bootcamp and Beyond the Summit, and there was the Panda Cup being run by Panda Global in direct partnership with Nintendo. And everything seemed to be running pretty smoothly, but then just a few weeks before the Smash World Tour's big final event was supposed to take place, they abruptly announced that everything was cancelled. They had not been able to get it licensed by Nintendo. This was an absolute catastrophe. VG Bootcamp took a massive financial hit, and to compound things, things, people on that side of the fence immediately began pointing fingers at the CEO of Panda Global, saying he was trying to orchestrate their fall behind the scenes and sabotage Nintendo against them. He denies this and has his own interpretation, but for the sake of this video, who's actually ultimately to blame isn't really that important. What is important is that this led to the downfall of Panda Global too. The Panda Cup finale was still supposed to go ahead, but a lot of players ended up boycotting it. Ludwig, the YouTuber, hosted his own event to support them on the same day. The writing was on the wall, the Panda Cup got cancelled, and the entire Panda Global organization also collapsed. And the final result was millions of sponsorship dollars down the drain, Smash's most influential organization destroyed, the scene's burgeoning relationship with Nintendo largely severed, and things would never really be the same again. There's been some bounce back since then. Luminosity in particular stepped up to fill in some of the roles that Panda Global used to cover, but yeah, at the end of the day, the damage was done. And that, more than anything, with the possible exception of the 2020 purge, although even then the game kept trucking afterwards, marks the end of real, organized, competitive Smash Ultimate for me. It's still around, obviously, and honestly, it still doesn't even have bad numbers. It has the kind of numbers most fighting games would be happy to see. But after that big collapse, I mean, the game's already 4 years old, and you've just run into this massive problem with Nintendo trying to interface with the community. That's probably not going to happen again. So what's the big drive to try and create high-level organized competition on that scale? The answer is there isn't. So this video is a well-done summary overall, but if you're looking for feedback, I actually expected that whole Panda Global Smash World Tour escapade to be a pretty substantial portion of the runtime, so not covering it whatsoever, given the topic, I think that's a miss. What it does do well, though, is cover the overall rise and fall of the hype cycle of the game. Content creation based primarily around Smash has been my full-time job since not too long after Ultimate launched, and I can say I know this cycle's true because you feel it in the numbers. In the early days, it was honestly quite an easy job. I stumbled into it almost by accident, but as time's gone on, I find myself just working harder and harder and harder, and it's a similar story with most people I know in the Smash scene. There honestly aren't too many people left in my position. Yes, I am fortunate enough to still be making this work and making a living off of covering primarily Smash Ultimate. I know I've been doing some like Rivals 2 stuff recently. I've dipped into Zelda before, but this is still by far my bread and butter, and most people who started out in my position have had to diversify into other games or drastically shake up their format, things like that. Is that inherently a negative thing? I honestly don't think so. It seems naive to think that those numbers would stay perfectly stable over years and years and years. People just move on to other things. Yes, Smash Ultimate did take some pretty heavy hits over the years that other scenes don't always have to deal with, but if I'm being honest, in my position, that didn't really change anything. The vast majority of people watching Smash content, and honestly, I even think tuning into tournaments, are not super diehard competitors, so for most of them, life just went on as normal. And I think the real downfall of Ultimate, if there is one, it's just time. Don't get me wrong, I still love this game and have plenty of things I want to talk about with it, but ooh, I'd be lying if I said that Switch 2 news wasn't getting heavier and heavier every day we had to wait. In the meantime though, this has been the downfall of Smash Ultimate by MintJoy Pictures. Thanks to them for letting me use their video. They'll be linked in the description and pinned comment. Check them out. And thanks to you for watching, everyone. Let me know what your experience has been like with Smash Ultimate over the years. Likes and comments really help spread a video on YouTube's algorithm, so if you think this one deserved it, much appreciated. You can check out another MockRock Talk video here, and Echoes of Wisdom Smash moveset video on MockRock below. And patrons, members, and subs get perks like early videos and Discord access. Later, people.